Imagine being in a room with someone who only talks about themselves. Everything they do is to make them look good. And when things don't go their way, they turn everything around and make you feel guilty. That sounds pretty exhausting, right? But what if I told you that not all narcissism looks like this? What if there are different types of narcissism and not all of them are as obvious as you would think? In today's video, we're going to explore the surprising and sometimes subtle ways that narcissism can show up in our lives and how to spot the different types. Stick around because some of these just might surprise you. Let's start with cerebral narcissism. Cerebral narcissism is where people feel superior because of their intellect. Think of somebody who believes their brains make them better than everyone else. They don't necessarily need to be the loudest or the most charming person in the room, but they do want to be recognized for how smart and creative they are. It's like they think they should get extra credit or something just for being brainy, even if they haven't actually done anything very impressive. There are some signs of cerebral narcissism, things like constantly bragging about their intellect. They might not talk about how amazing they look or how popular they are, but they'll find a way to slip in how much smarter than everybody else they are, whether it's dropping obscure facts, like they're on an episode of Jeopardy, or belittling other people's knowledge. They can't resist showing off. They'll, of course, belittle other people's opinions and ideas. When you share your thoughts, they often shoot them down, claiming they know better, or maybe they'll even say that your ideas are simplistic or unsophisticated. It's like they always have to have the last word, especially when it comes to anything intellectual. They're, of course, seeking validation for their intellect. They love being the go-to person for the advice or being seen as the smartest person in the room. If they feel like people aren't recognizing their genius, they might get upset and act like you're disrespecting them. So here's a good example. Imagine you're at a party and someone is going on and on about their latest research project. They constantly mention how everybody else just doesn't understand the complexity of the subject. They barely listen to anybody else. And if you or someone else tries to join in the conversation, they might start talking over you just to make sure that they are the one impressing everybody with their intellectual superiority. And if you happen to challenge something they say, get ready for a very long-winded explanation about how you're just not seeing things the right way. It's all about intellectual superiority. It is a more subtle, quieter type of narcissism, but it's there nonetheless, and it's still pretty toxic. Next up, let's talk about communal narcissism. Communal narcissism is all about people who want to be seen as the good person, the one who's always helping, always so selfless, always doing the right thing. But here's the twist. They're not actually doing it out of genuine kindness. They are doing it because they want everyone to admire them for being so caring, so giving, compassionate, things like that. It's like they're running their own personal PR campaign to be seen as the ultimate good guy. And if people don't recognize how awesome they are for being so helpful, they can get pretty upset. So here are some signs of communal narcissism. Of course, constantly seeking praise for their kindness. They'll make sure you know about all the good deeds they're doing, whether it's volunteering, donating, or just being there for somebody. But again, not about helping. It's about being recognized and acknowledged for the help. And if they don't get it, rest assured this kind of narcissist is going to feel slighted and resentful. Of course, they're using those good deeds in order to manipulate. They might try to guilt trip people by saying things like, I can't believe you didn't even notice how much I've been doing. I've worked so hard and no one appreciates it. Also turning everything into a moral high ground. They like to position themselves as morally superior and passing judgment on to others. They might look down on someone for being selfish or uncharitable, even if their own behavior isn't exactly selfless. As an example, imagine someone who constantly talks about how much time they spend volunteering at a shelter or how much they're helping their friends in need. They might, of course, post about it on social media every chance they get. And if they don't get the likes and the comments and all the little stuff they're expecting, they're going to act like they've been completely overlooked. Sometimes in a group setting, they'll make sure everyone knows how much they've sacrificed for others. But if anyone else tries to do something kind, they'll downplay it or act like, of course, it doesn't compare to their own efforts. With communal narcissism, the focus is on the need for admiration when it comes to being good, rather than being admired for things like beauty or intellect or success. These individuals can seem caring on the surface, but their selfishness is driven by the desire to be seen as some kind of morally superior saint. Let's talk about covert narcissism, also called vulnerable narcissism. Covert narcissism is a type that's a little harder to spot because it doesn't come with the loud, attention-seeking behavior that you might expect. Instead, people with covert narcissism tend to be more quiet and introverted. But underneath that calm exterior, they still have the inflated sense of self-importance, and they feel like they deserve special treatment. They might not outwardly boast about how great they are, but they still have a deep need for admiration, and they are really sensitive about it if they don't get it. So there are some signs of covert narcissism. Most of us probably know these pretty well. There is the constant need for validation. While they're not out there loudly talking about their achievements, they do still want constant reassurance and praise. So these are the people who are going to fish for compliments or drop hints about their accomplishments. These people often feel misunderstood or special in a quiet, unique way. They're going to talk about how no one's on their level. No one truly gets them or understands them. They're different from everybody else on another level. They often believe they have a unique perspective or special insight that other people can't understand. Of course, there is the hypersensitivity to criticism. Covert narcs are very sensitive to criticism, even when it's minor or extremely constructive. They're going to react very passive-aggressively, get defensive, internalize the feedback, of course, take it really personally. This is a person with an incredibly fragile ego. They're going to play the victim, use that whole poor me game that they love to do. An example of covert narcissism would be, imagine a colleague who never brags about their work, but when you're having a conversation, they subtly drop hints about how much more effort they're putting in compared to others. If somebody else gets recognition for something they did, this person might act hurt or withdrawn, making you feel like you've ignored their contributions. If you criticize them, even lightly, they might get quiet. Next time you talk, they might give you the cold shoulder or maybe make a snarky comment without directly confronting you. It's all about protecting the fragile self-esteem. Covert narcissists don't necessarily demand the spotlight, but they still want attention, admiration, and validation. Their approach is just simply more subtle. They often hide their grandiosity behind a veil of insecurity and victimhood. And that's what makes covert narcissism tough. It's tough to spot and tough to deal with because this kind of narcissism doesn't feel like narcissism. It often just feels like this person has the worst luck in the world. They're just a little sensitive. They're the underdog. Nobody will give them a chance, and they're misunderstood. This is the perfect place to talk about fragile narcissism. Fragile narcissism is like a mix of covert, which we just talked about, and really intense insecurity. Unlike grandiose narcs who seem outwardly confident and boastful, and we'll get there in a minute, fragile narcs are more sensitive and easily hurt. This is very closely related to covert narcissism. They still have the need to feel special, but their sense of self-worth is fragile, which means they're constantly worried about being criticized or rejected. When things don't go their way, they're going to retreat into self-pity, get really defensive, anything they can do to protect their ego. So signs of fragile narcissism would be things like, of course, the extreme sensitivity to criticism, things like emotional highs and lows. They might have mood swings that are linked to how other people perceive them. If they're getting positive attention, they're on top of the world. But if they feel overlooked, rejected, or criticized, they're going to spiral into self-doubt and or frustration. Of course, they play the victim, very similar to the covert. And like the covert, they're going to avoid situations where they might fail because their self-esteem is so dependent on external validation. They might avoid challenging situations where they don't come out looking perfect. They'd rather not even try than risk failure or humiliation. An example of that is someone who's always talking about how hard they're trying to be successful, but when they face a setback, like not getting a promotion or receiving feedback they don't like, they become upset, they shut down, they really blow it out of proportion. Oh, it's the end of the world. They complain no one sees how hard they're working. These are the people where everything is unfair. Everyone treats them unfairly. Nothing goes the way they want it to. On the outside, again, much like covert, they just look like someone who's struggling, but deep down, they still need to feel superior and deserving of success. Fragile narcissism is really tough to deal with because, once more, it's not a loud, arrogant sense of superiority. It's this kind of emotional thing, insecurities all around, and they still need validation. They're just not outwardly flashy about it. Are you feeling the effects of narcissistic abuse? Traditional therapy isn't your only option anymore. With almost 6 years of experience here on YouTube, dedicated to understanding narcissism and sharing my insights, I offer a flexible phone chat service that might be just what you need. As a fellow survivor, you'll be speaking to someone who truly gets it. Someone who has not only studied narcissism extensively, but has also lived through it. Our conversations will feel more like talking to a friend than a formal therapy session in a comfortable, non-judgmental space. If you're looking for more than just a listening ear, I can also provide practical, personalized strategies to help you navigate your situation. Feel free to reach out anytime. My contact information is on the screen, and I really look forward to connecting with you. I say it's time that we talk about what I think most people, myself included, picture in our minds when we think of the typical narcissist. And this is grandiose narcissism. And it's the type of narcissism that is the most obvious and, honestly, the most attention-grabbing. These people have a huge sense of their own importance and love to be the center of attention. They truly believe they're special, and they expect others to see them that way too. Unlike the more introverted types, which we just talked about, grandiose narcs are not afraid to boast about their own achievements, their looks, or just flat out how much better they are than everyone else. They crave admiration and validation and feel entitled to it, often at the expense of others. So the signs of grandiose narcissism, I'm not going to spend too long on these. The classic exaggerated sense of self-importance. They're better, they're destined for greatness, they deserve the special treatment because they're just too important or too talented to be treated the same, as the rest of us mere mortals. There's the classic need for constant attention, the entitlement. They believe they deserve special privileges and opportunities and get pissed when they don't think that they are getting what they're owed. Of course, the hallmark of narcissism, the classic lack of empathy. Grandiose narcissists are so focused on themselves that they really, really struggle, obviously, to care about other people's feelings, thoughts, opinions, ideas, perspectives, roll it all up there. They might dismiss others' needs or belittle them or exploit them because they see themselves as more important. There's the arrogance, the superiority. So we'll give an example here. Imagine someone constantly talking about their latest promotion or achievement. And when they walk in the room, they expect everyone to notice and admire them. If the conversation is not revolving around them, they're going to steer it right back to where they feel it needs to be. How many people they know, how amazing their last project was, or just anything else. They're destined, again, for those bigger things. Grandiose narcissism is often, like I say, the most notable. These individuals have no problem with flaunting things. They're confident to the point of arrogance, and their inflated sense of self-worth can make them come off as selfish, entitled, and at sometimes even delusional. It's always going to be about them, always. Now let's break down malignant narcissism, probably the most dangerous and toxic of them all. Malignant narcissism is like the dark side of narcissism. It didn't need a darker side, but here we are. It takes the classic traits, which we just talked about with the grandiose narcissist, but it combines them with antisocial behaviors and a stronger, if that was possible, lack of empathy. Malignant narcissists are not just focused on making themselves look good. They will actively manipulate, deceive, and harm other people to get what they want. They might not only feel entitled, but they're willing to exploit and hurt others to maintain their sense of superiority. This is the type of narcissism that's really dangerous, especially when it comes to things like relationships and workplaces. So there are some signs, of course, of malignant narcissism. They're highly manipulative. These are the masters right here of manipulation. They know how to play people to get what they want. And this includes gaslighting, guilt tripping, of which they're also masters, by the way, and pretending to be the victim to get sympathy and control over others. Malignant narcissists don't just lack empathy. They lack remorse and guilt. They don't feel bad about their actions, even when they harm others. If they do something harmful, they don't apologize. If they do, it sure as hell isn't sincere. Their behavior is justified as far as they're concerned. These are the people where it's all about cruelty and sadism. Malignant narcissists can be outright cruel, and in some cases, even enjoy seeing other people suffer. They might derive pleasure from watching someone struggle, fail, or feel humiliated. And their lack of empathy and desire for control leads to these abusive behaviors. There's also aggressive entitlement. They believe the world owes them everything, and they will use aggressive tactics if they don't think this is happening. This is emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and exerting power, exerting their dominance. Malignant narcissists can also deal with a high level of paranoia and distrust. They often feel persecuted, betrayed. They see a lot of conspiracies. If someone challenges their behavior or gives them a hard time, they can become paranoid and take drastic measures to discredit and punish that person. An example would be a boss who seems very charming and charismatic at first, but gradually starts manipulating their employees. They play favorites, belittle others behind their backs, or actually pit colleagues against each other to maintain power. If someone challenges their authority, they might spread lies or rumors to ruin that person's reputation. A malignant narcissist might use emotional abuse to control their partner, having them feel worthless and crazy, all while trying to look like the good guy. Malignant narcissism is by far the most dangerous because this is not just about having a big ego. It's actively harming other people to protect the ego. The manipulative, abusive, and aggressive behavior can cause long-lasting damage to relationships, work environments, and people's mental health. It is a toxic mix of narcissism, aggression, and a lack of empathy that makes malignant narcs particularly destructive and very hard to deal with. I haven't touched on somatic narcissism yet, and I think there's no time like the present. Somatic narcissism is all about people who place an extreme focus on their physical appearance, fitness, or a romantic appeal. I'll say it like that because YouTube doesn't like the other word. These individuals measure their worth based on how great they look, how desirable they seem to other people, how other people see their body. For somatic narcissists, it's not enough to just be attractive. They need to be admired and chased and sought after for their attractiveness. And obvious signs: obsession with their appearance, constant need for praise and admiration about the way they look. These are the incredibly vain people with their self-obsession. A somatic narcissist might take endless selfies, posting them on social media, always talking about how great they look. And it's not just about wanting to look good. Again, it's about getting the recognition for it. Also, they're going to use their appearance and other things they have about themselves to control and manipulate people. And as usual, in narky fashion, the disregard for people's needs or feelings. I also think it's a good idea to address the fact that someone can display traits of more than one type of narcissism. Narcissism runs on a spectrum, and it's not always neatly categorized. People often have a mix of characteristics from different types, depending on their personality, their experiences, or the situations they find themselves in. So I think it's a good idea to talk about it a little. Different types of narcissism are often defined by how the person seeks validation, what they feel that they're entitled to, whether it's admiration, the looks, the intellect, some other kind of superiority. But just because someone fits into one category doesn't mean that they don't have behaviors from other categories. In fact, many narcs are actually a blend. For example, a grandiose narcissist might have some somatic traits if they're seeking admiration not just for their accomplishments, but their appearance. So they might not only boast about how great they are at their job, but how great their body looks, or how much attention they get because of how they look. A covert narc, someone who's more introverted, might also show traits of fragile, which I discussed earlier in the video. A malignant narcissist, who has the mix of narkiness with antisocial behavior, actually can display both covert and more overt or grandiose traits. They can seem charming, yet superior, and they manipulate others, but behind the scenes they're paranoid and emotionally insecure. So why might somebody with narcissism have multiple types? Well, there are things like need for validation and self-perception. A person's need for validation can vary in different areas of their life. Somebody might feel superior based on their appearance, but also need intellectual validation. In a professional setting, they might crave grandiose recognition, but at home or in a more personal setting, they demonstrate fragile or covert traits. Narcissists are literally little human chameleons. They act one way in one space or setting and completely different in others. It's called a situational influence, so to speak. Environment or context can trigger different types of narcissism. There is also a psychological complexity to all of this. Bottom line is people aren't just one-dimensional. Okay, maybe some super boring, not narcissistic people are, but most people aren't one-dimensional. Our behaviors are shifting depending on our emotional state and history and even what stage of life we're in. A person might evolve through different types of narcissism as they get older. And also narcissism, really when you boil it down, it's maladaptive or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Narcs develop certain traits as defense mechanisms in response to past trauma or unresolved issues. For example, somebody who suffered emotional neglect might develop covert narcissism to protect themselves, but later in life might develop some more signs of grandiose narcissism as a way to compensate for feeling inferior or worthless. And there is an example of what you'd call a blended narcissist. Imagine a person who has grandiose traits. They love being the center of attention at parties. They boast about their career. And then they have some somatic traits. They pride themselves on their physical appearance. They're always working out, posting the selfies. But then you add in the fragile traits. On the inside, this person struggles with feelings of insecurity. When they don't get the attention they crave, they feel deeply rejected. They sulk, become passive-aggressive. In this case, this person is displaying grandiose, somatic, and fragile narcissism pretty much all at once. They're going to use different traits in different contexts, like I say, depending on what's going on for them. So now that we've explored the different types of narcissism, it's clear this personality disorder can look a lot of different ways. Grandiose, cerebral, more subtle, more complex, whatever it is. But understanding these types, I want to make this very clear. It's not about labeling people. This is about recognizing patterns. The more we understand narcissism, the better we can protect our boundaries, manage relationships, and even challenge unhealthy behaviors. So next time you encounter somebody who seems a little too preoccupied with their image, or maybe always trying to stay in the spotlight, you might just have a clearer understanding of where they're coming from and what they're all about. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on narcissism. Let me know down in the comments what type of narcissism you find the most interesting, the most scary. We'll all have the same answer on that one. Or if you've had any experiences with narcs that you want to share. Have a great day, survivor, and take care of yourself.